Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and we're here at the North White Plains train station to show off our charging stations that have been recently installed to benefit the commuting public that gets on the Metro North Harlem Line station here at North White Plains, and then also to talk about legislation that we're going to be submitting that we think will help us expand the presence of charging stations across Westchester County. I'm joined by Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins, by County Legislator Vedat Gashi, also by Peter McCart, who's our Director of Sustainability, by Hugh Grecian, who's our Commissioner of the Department of Public Works and Transportation, and Deputy Commissioner Bud Nicoletti. And both Pete and Vedat have cars that are charging up as we're here, so we're actually covering two birds with one stone. This really is another step in our climate crisis action plan, which Pete McCart is responsible for, and he is in the process of implementing a number of very good ideas. Last week, we had a major rollout of our plans to deal with food scrap recycling as a way to take out of the waste stream food recycling waste, and to do that in a way that was both environmentally sensitive and cost efficient. This is yet another element of what we're trying to do to deal with climate crisis, and that is try to help build that infrastructure that's needed for electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles to be able to function. For those of us who drive our automobiles everywhere here in suburbia, if we run our cars on traditional gasoline, we know that we have an infrastructure of service stations that are all over the county, and that at some point in time, even if we're in a distant part of the county, not our normal routine, and if we run low on gas, there's a place we can go to make sure we have enough fuel so we can complete our journey, get home. For those who are driving electric vehicles, be they hybrid or fully electric, that infrastructure is not yet in place around this county. There are examples where some private entities have been able to establish charging stations. You see it in some of the hotels of our county. You'll see it in a couple of other selected businesses that do it. In some cases, it's only available for the people who work for that company and maybe office there. But here at a suburban commuter train station, which land is owned by Westchester County, this is part of the Bronx River Reservation, a much discussed piece of land a year ago, where we have folks who park here, commute into the city. It is an ideal location for those to charge up their car while they're in New York City and have full charge basis when they come back off of the train. And to create these particular 10 stations here is just the first step in a multiple step plan, and Pete will talk about this in a second. What's also important is legislation that we're proposing to make sure that across the county that creating charging stations becomes a standard part of the way we operate in Westchester County in order to aid to the infrastructure. Now, county parks, county facilities are not located in every community in the most convenient locations. There's a set pattern of where our parks are and where our other facilities are, but we're going to do everything we can to do our share to make sure that this infrastructure is in place, as witnessed by what we have today. So we're going to have a couple of other speakers speak, and then we'll take any questions. First, Hugh Grecian, who's our Commissioner for the Department of Public Works and Transportation. Behind all of these plans has to be the mind of an engineer, and Hugh and his team, Bud as part of that team, have thought through these things and helped us take a desire to do something and turn it into the practicality of doing something. So Hugh, if you'd share your thoughts, we appreciate it.
I think the train is coming.
Yes.
Another headache coming into the station.
Yes, good afternoon. As the County Executive George Latimer just was talking about our new program, our new initiative to at all our county facilities with new legislation, working with the Board of Legislators to bring these facilities to all our parking lots, all our parking garages. It's something we've been working on for a number of years. We're finally bringing it to a head. We're going after every funding source we can, any grant programs we can, and we're making it a priority within the department to do just that. I mean, it's part of it, as the county executive said, it's part of a greater initiative too. We're on the transportation side, all our buses, all our articulated hybrids that we bought, 78 of those last year. We're online to go out for another 108 40-foot buses this year, 2 fully electric. So in every asset, a part of the county, anything that we're involved with, any fleet programs we have, buying whether it's vehicles for the airport, countywide fleet, we're all considering hybrid electric first or a fully electric first before we proceed. And again, that's both at the direction of the county exec and the Board of Legislators.
Now, it was a number of years ago, before I came into this position, where members of the Board of Legislators identified a position that they wanted to see have in the executive branch, a director of sustainability, environmental and energy issues codified in an individual. When we came into office, we really felt that that position could be our point person on environmental issues. We do have in Westchester County a Department of Environmental Facilities, and that is the department that handles our sewer treatment function, our garbage collection, material recovery facilities, and things of that nature. But it is not really a department of the environment the way that the state or the federal government has it. So we put on the back of one individual a host of different public policy issues that reflect the environment and our desire to be environmentally sensitive and really to deal with what is happening in the world around us and what is going to happen in the years to come if this world doesn't respond properly. But we put them on the shoulders of a fellow named Pete McCart, who has been well placed. He has tackled this job with energy and enthusiasm, better than I stopped that puck from going into the net. And the reality is that Pete has been the energy behind most of our policies on energy and environment. So Pete, if you would please come share your thoughts.
Thank you, George.
The climate crisis is real, and I'm proud to be working with George and Ken and our very able DPW staff, and thanks to Bud. Bud has always been a vision here in the White Plains and in the county of moving us forward on a lot of our initiatives. The electrification of our fleet is a key element of our task to tackle climate change here. And it's also just good for the environment as much as we can minimize the exhaust and the smog that comes from that. So we're putting in the chargers here. The chargers are up and running. We have several cars here that are charging, but we're also going to be putting in charging stations across the county in our at the golf courses, the county parks. And they have a dual purpose of also having catering services there and restaurants. But this is an exciting time. There's a lot to be done, and thankfully we have the County Executive Latimer here to really he has the political will to do it, and we're getting it done thanks to the able staff of the Parks Department and DPW. And I'm just happy to be here and steer it along. But thank you guys. Thank you everybody.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah.
So we've mentioned that there are 10 charging stations that opened here fairly recently. We have, if memory serves me correctly, we have plans to create charging stations at Westchester County Center in White Plains, at the Maple Moor Golf Course in the southern part of White Plains, at Hudson Hills in Ossining, in Dunwoody in Yonkers, in Mohansick, which I believe is in Yorktown, Cortland area. There may be a couple of other places that we have them scheduled for. At Saxon Woods, which is also a White Plains Scarsdale area right off the Hutch. And those are obvious areas where we can work because we know that we do have multiple use in some of those facilities. There are people, as Peter pointed out, that will go to dine at those locations as well as go and play golf. And if you play a round of golf and you plug up your car, charge it up during the time you're playing a round of golf, that works in the same way that it does if you're at a train station. Now, separate and distinct from what the county is doing, Metro North has indicated that they're looking very aggressively in most of the lots in Westchester County, which are owned by Metro North. This is a unique one in that the county owns this because it is part of the Bronx River Reservation. And I believe that Metro North MTA intends to announce as well some stations and charging stations, which we think is going to be helpful. The more of these stations we get, the more likely it is that we'll have an infrastructure that will encourage more people to buy electric cars and to use electric cars across the board. The legislation that we've submitted to the County Board of Legislators, which Legislator Vedat Gashi and other legislators are considering, will require that for the county, all parking lots that have a space capacity for 250 vehicles or less would be equipped with level 1 charging stations in 10% of the total number of parking spaces, and with level 2 or 3 charging stations in 10% of the total number of parking stations. And perhaps you can explain the difference on question. If there's a question, you can explain the difference in terms of the levels of charging. It also represents, for parking garage and open parking lots, same threshold of 250 vehicles. If you have 50 parking spaces capable of supporting 25 level 1 stations and 25 level 2 and 3 charging stations. What all of that means is more charging stations. It means having the greater infrastructure that we need to have so that a person who has one of these vehicles can with confidence know if they're traveling to a parking facility run by Westchester County that they know there will be charging stations in there. And I suspect as this becomes more and more popular, you're going to worry if you have enough available space there to be able to get up and get your car charged. Before we go to questions, just want to answer one other, or not, just address one other thing. Dealing with the climate crisis is not one dramatic action. And sometimes Americans are looking for that one bold action. Maybe it's a stroke of the pen legislation, or it's one item being funded. And once that's done, we can put this behind us. We never have to worry about it again. To deal with the climate crisis, it's going to take thousands of large and small decisions. And those decisions aren't going to be made by the county government alone or government in general alone. It's going to be made by individuals. Each of us have to look at how we live our lives, what our lifestyles are, what we're comfortable doing, and understand that there are adjustments to be made. A week ago, when we talked about food scrap recycling, what we're basically saying to people is you're going to have to adjust that you take food scraps and you put them in a separate place than you would your normal garbage. And you have to figure out how that's going to work in your life so it becomes part of your lifestyle. Once you segment that from the garbage stream, you will be doing what is environmentally correct. And similarly, how you determine your personal mobility will determine whether or not we're going to have more of these dangerous greenhouse gases in the environment or less of them. And that, of course, is what we have when we have full electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. As Hugh and Peter both pointed out, we have a bus fleet of about 300 buses that are in the process of transition. We have a car fleet of county cars that are used by employees of the county of about 1,200 cars. It is something where it's going to take some time because it certainly takes money. The life of a car that we've already bought, we need to exhaust that lifespan and then replace it. But we are committed to doing those things. And you should not interpret that any one or two things that we're doing represents the totality of what we're doing. But you should not underestimate what one or two things means when they are positive steps in the right direction. So with that, we're going to stop our little presentation, open up to any questions from our friends in the press. And you can direct them to me or any of our colleagues up here if you'd like.
How many parking lots are you anticipating will be fitted with these chargers, and roughly how much do you expect this will cost?
I don't know what the per unit cost is, if anybody can comment on that. I think right now in the outset we're talking something to the tune of 10 to 20 parking lots over the course of time that would ultimately, between the legislation and what we're doing, that would have additional charges as a round range of numbers.
Yes, the chargers themselves are about $4,000 a piece, but in this particular case we got a grant from the state, NYSERDA, state agency, so we had $40,000 in grant money, so it basically offset the cost of the chargers. We did pay for the installation, but we folded it into the project. We did a 500-car renovation here, the parking lot, so it wasn't a total lift, just for the electric charging stations. We incorporated all the pavement was replaced, so all the conduit underground didn't need to have trenching and that kind of thing as if it were a standalone project. So we're looking at trying to fit that into other projects that we're doing so we get the economy of scale. And the grant program that the state has is still open, so the future chargers that we're talking about, we're hopeful we'll get about the same rebate from them.
Any other questions? What?
Public lots or the legislation I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Good question. Public lots only? It's not for private.
Peter, it's both, but Peter, why don't you answer
In
it?
fact, I did want to make the point that we're also putting charging stations in our own employee parking lots, and we have a capital project at our main garage at the main building, and we're putting in charging stations there. So the idea is for those to be a public. They're in our county parks, so that's the answer there.
Yeah, they'd be open to the public.
Yeah.
When the public comes to those various facilities, they would be able to, connect their car and charge.
But those thresholds of having 10% of the number of spaces electric chargers, that would be in public lots, not
Well,
private.
Yes, but let me let Ken address the question a little more directly.
Okay, thanks, George. The legislation that is proposed has two different components to it. One component of it is in the county lots, as county executive was explaining. The other component of it is whenever there's a county tax break given. So let's say a project comes to us for the IDA, that particular project will have a component that requires that there's an expenditure for these charging stations in it. So it's not just the county facilities, but anytime county dollars are involved in it, should the legislation be adopted that way, that would happen. That's a significant part of the vision, as the county executive had laid out, that it is not just the little things or the things that we do in the county, but as we have invested in dollars. And connecting to the question about that, Deputy Commissioner Nicoletti answered, if it's part of a larger project, it costs a lot less to do. And that's really part of the beauty of this, when you're making changes, not that you're having to do these installations on their own.
And yeah.
How long does it actually take for a vehicle to become fully charged?
Gentlemen? Bud?
That's kind of like the EPA mileage may vary, so it depends on what the car looked like when it came in. If the battery was completely dead and it's a fairly intensive battery pack like a Tesla, it might be 7 or 8 hours. That's at the long side. If it's a plug-in hybrid, probably an hour. These are all level 2 chargers, so they have quite high capacity, and then they will automatically back off as the car voltage comes up in the battery pack and reduce the amount of electricity that it draws. Matter of fact, our next project is to do an energy management system so that each charger doesn't necessarily have to have the full capacity. There's a kind of an electronic brain that would monitor what all 10 are doing, 10 different cars, each one requiring different power, and it meters it out so that you don't have this big surge of power to, take care of every single car all at once.
It says no parking except electric vehicles. So if you get a gas vehicle in space, what happens?
You get a ticket. You get an invitation to pay the county some money for breaking the rules. We would hope that people would do the right thing. It's pretty clearly that these are set aside for this purpose, in the same way that a handicap space is set aside for purpose. We would expect most people will, in fact, follow the rules. But there is enforcement of parking regulations here. There are people that park here without having gone through, certain things, and we'll enforce it. Any other questions?
Explain the difference between the different levels of charges.
Well, in terms of kilowatts, which might not mean much to everybody, so a level 1 charger is about 3 kilowatts, and the level 2 is about 7.5. So it's roughly 2 or 2.5 times the capacity, which kind of roughly equates to the time that it might take for you to charge.
But
so.
how about it's
I'm
a
sorry.
dry
Oh,
plug
yes,
versus
yeah. I mean,
220.
yeah, and right. They operate on different voltages, and but if you have even a plug-in hybrid that normally would be fine with level 1 charging, you can still plug it in here with level 2. It will just meter out just how much power you need to charge up that battery, which is obviously a smaller pack because it's a hybrid and not a full battery electric. And then you might be charged in a half an hour or an hour tops, at that level.
I think the important thing to keep in mind is the people who have these vehicles know the answer to those questions. All right, we'll break for a time now. If you'd like to interview one-on-one any of our guests here, clearly some of them know a lot more about the science behind this. But this is, again, one more step in the right direction, and hopefully we'll keep on pushing forward. Thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen. Bud?
Thank you.